Top officials responsible for the Tokyo Olympics and Paralympics say overseas spectators won't be allowed to attend the games due to the coronavirus pandemic.
Countries around the world, including Japan, are strictly restricting cross-border travel. The current situation makes it difficult to guarantee free entry into Japan from abroad this summer.
The announcement came after a highly anticipated meeting of organizers. Over 600,000 tickets have been sold abroad. People who bought them will be able to get refunds. The online gathering brought together the heads of the organizing committee and the International Olympic Committee, the governor of Tokyo, and other officials. IOC President Thomas Bach spoke out in a statement after the meeting. He said the IOC's top priority was, is, and remains to organize safe Olympic and Paralympic Games for everyone. Bach also said the organization is standing shoulder to shoulder with its Japanese partners and wants to make the Games a great success. Concerns have been mounting about allowing people into Japan for the Games due to the spread of unpredictable new coronavirus strains. The Olympics are right around the corner now. The torch relay starts next Thursday, and the Games are scheduled to open after a one-year delay on July 23rd. People both in and outside of Japan have been anxiously awaiting the decision, which comes after months of deliberation.
I'm disappointed that I won't be able to attend, but I also feel relieved that I just know one way or the other because I've just been waiting so long to find out.
Kyla Gardner and her partner live in Australia. They spent $3,000 on tickets with plans to see 13 different events. Now they'll settle for watching the world's top athletes from home.
I think it's definitely reasonable not to allow international spectators because we've all been through this pandemic. We see how quickly it spreads and how difficult it is to contain.
In Japan, people have been preparing to greet and guide visitors. Chiba City was beginning to roll out training for about 1,500 hopeful volunteers.
I took up English lessons for this, so it's a bit of a shame that I can't use the skills I've learned. It's a letdown, but I think holding the event itself is significant.
Then there's the fallout for the travel industry, already struggling through the pandemic. This Tokyo hotel was fully booked for the Games, but about 80% of reservations came from overseas.
I can imagine that we'll get cancellations, so we have to seek out a different clientele, like Japanese people or event officials.
Hotels hope new packages aimed at domestic tourists will soften the blow from what they expect to be a major financial hit. Athletes around the world are talking about the absence of spectators from overseas at the upcoming Tokyo Games. Serbian tennis star Novak Djokovic spoke to NHK.
What can we do? I mean, those are the circumstances that we have to face and we have to accept today around the world, everywhere, that Olympics will happen because it's just it's the biggest sports event in the history of sport, and we want to be there and we want to celebrate sport and represent our country.
Japanese badminton star Momota Kento said he is sorry fans from other countries will not be at the events. He said spectators from overseas gave him a lot of energy in the past with their enthusiastic cheering. Japan's prefectural governors want strict measures maintained to prevent the coronavirus from spreading after a state of emergency in the Tokyo area ends on Sunday. Governors from about 30 of 47 prefectures across Japan held an online meeting on Saturday.
The number of new cases has stopped declining in my prefecture. It even shows a sign of increasing again. After the state of emergency is lifted, we need to ease preventive measures gradually, in stages.
The governors compiled proposals for the central government to prevent another surge in infections. They include financial support for conducting extensive PCR tests and tracking infection routes. The governors are also calling on the government to complete vaccinations for healthcare workers as soon as possible and start inoculations for elderly citizens. More than 1,500 new cases were reported across Japan on Saturday. Nearly half of them were in the Tokyo area. The defense chiefs from the United States and India have agreed to work together to secure peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific region. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin met Defense Minister Rajnath Singh in New Delhi on Saturday. They reaffirmed the U.S., India, Australia, and Japan will work together to strengthen regional cooperation. Those four countries are known as the Quad. The two also confirmed plans to work closely with members of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations.
Our discussions today focused on our wide-ranging defense cooperation and expanding military-to-military engagement across services, information sharing, cooperation in emerging sectors of defense, and mutual logistics support.
Austin stressed the importance of India's role in regional security. He apparently had China in mind.
As the world faces a global pandemic and growing challenges to an open and stable international system, the U.S. and India relationship is a stronghold of a free and open Indo-Pacific region.
U.S. President Joe Biden attended an online summit of the Quad countries earlier this month. He expressed his intention to enhance cooperation among the four nations. The U.S. President and Vice President have taken aim at racism against Asian Americans on a visit to the state of Georgia. The trip comes after 8 people, including 6 of Asian descent, were shot dead in the state. The killings happened amid rising anti-Asian violence in the country. President Joe Biden gave a speech after meeting Asian American community leaders.
Whatever the motivation, we know this. Too many Asian Americans have been walking up and down the streets and worrying, waking up each morning the past year feeling their safety and the safety of their loved ones are at stake. Hate can have no safe harbor in America. It must stop. And it's on all of us.
Kamala Harris also spoke. She said racism in the U.S. is real and has always been an issue.
Everyone has the right to go to work, to go to school, to walk down the street and be safe. And also the right to be recognized as an American.
No more hate! No more hate!
In New York, more than 200 people, mostly of Asian descent, protested against racism. An organization monitoring racism says there were nearly 3,800 reports of discrimination or violence against Asian Americans in the 12 months until February.
France has reintroduced restrictions to stop the spread of the coronavirus after a sharp rise in the number of infections. More than 21 million people will be affected by the new measures. Tougher restrictions have also been brought into force in Poland. There have been demonstrations against the lockdown in Warsaw as part of a coordinated series of protests in more than 40 cities, including London, Paris, and Berlin. The organizers of the Tokyo Olympics and Paralympics say no overseas spectators will be allowed to come to Japan to watch the events because of the pandemic. Officials say tickets purchased by overseas residents will be refunded. Officials in Australia are warning of potentially life-threatening flash floods along parts of the eastern coast. Residents in some suburbs of Sydney have been ordered to leave their homes.